Welcome to the Coast Morning Report. I'm Justin Stoner, a realtor with Central Coast Sotheby's Real Estate in Cambria. This week I spoke with Guido Frick, a German-born artist coming to Cambria to give a workshop to local artists May 24th through the 26th. Guido is known for his plein air work, and I asked him what drew him to that style. So what about plein air? What is the attraction there?
Well, the attraction of plein air is you become a part of nature, you know. You feel nature in a strange way. It's hard to explain because, you see, when you paint outdoor, the influence of nature is so strong that it just affects the way you put paint on the canvas. It's a big influence nature has. And you get more airing in your painting, you get more atmosphere in your painting, you get more true mood in your painting. For me, would be a big problem to paint a landscape in the studio. That's what the old masters did. They painted in the studio, and then came the Impressionists and said, well, if you want to paint a landscape, you cannot be in the studio. You need to be now. So it's much more truthful to paint outdoor a landscape than indoor, you know.
Yeah.
That's why, and I really like to go out, and I always tell my students, I say, you are living in such a great country. It's a sin, it's a shame when you sit in your studio. That's what they like to do, you know. They want to sit on the warm stoven, the husband stands behind them, gives them a neck rub, the cat sits on the lap, and then they are waiting till they got an idea about the next brushstroke and think they are big artists. That's wrong, you know. I don't like that.
Well, so who's the ideal candidate for the workshop? Is this for experienced painters, brand new painters? Who should show up?
I know by experience. I know that each different level artist can benefit from this kind of workshops, because I give general rules, instructions, you know, based on European Academy stuff. So even if you are a beginner, you learn something about how to paint. You see what you could do, what you could reach, what you could accomplish if you are if you practice. That's one of the things you need to do, you know. You cannot just do one workshop and then you don't do anything for the next 5 months. You have to paint. It's like a piano player when he has a concert. He cannot start to do exercise just on the day when he has concert. He needs to play on his piano all the days before the concert happens. Otherwise, he's out of shape, you know. And it's the same in painting. You cannot accomplish when you don't exercise. It's like in everything. If you play tennis or music or whatever, you need to exercise to come to a good result. So for experienced painter or better ones, you know, they also benefit from that. I have sometimes even art teacher in my classes. They want to learn this kind of specific way I'm teaching, and even they learn a lot and cannot do it right away. They need just to practice that too, you know. But it's very nice. They learn how to see nature, how to look at the subject they want to paint. They learn how to analyze it, and then to go for it. And you need to know a few things. You cannot just dip your brush in some colors hoping the Lord might help you and do it for you. That's not working that way, you know.
Notably, Guido studied under Sergei Bongart and Carol Hodder. I asked him to give me a sense of his background and development as an artist.
Well, first of all, I'm a painter. You know, I studied in Europe with a professor from Czechoslovakia for about 5 years. And then accidentally, I had subscribed Southwest Art magazine in the late 70s. And one day they had an article about a painter here in the United States. His name was Sergei Bongart. And he lived also in California, actually in Santa Monica, and he had a summer residence in Idaho. And when I saw this article and saw the illustration on it, I was totally thrilled about the painting they showed, you know, and I really loved him right away from the first glance I had on that. And then I read that he had workshops here in the States, and I managed to come over for the next 2 years. Not all the time, but once in a while I could jump in for a couple of weeks or so, you know, joining some workshops in Idaho on his summer residence. And so then I made a lot of connection with American painters. and started to paint, and I came into galleries and so on, and then people asked me if I would teach, and I said, well, I haven't started yet, but I will, and so that's how it started in the end,
So were you a painter prior to that, or?
Yeah, I was, as I said, I was taught by this professor from Czechoslovakia, but actually my first profession that time I was a journalist,
Oh, okay.
And I was writing for bigger newspaper in my home state in Germany, and I was writing about sports. So I wrote about soccer world championship, about Olympic Games in Munich, about Cassius Clay boxing that time, and
wow.
stuff like that, But it was when I was in my 20s. And I was smoking a lot and I was drinking a lot, and I knew if I continue this lifestyle, I will not even become 60 years old,
Yeah.
So the same time, when I did my journalism stuff over many years, actually, I painted all the time. And so later I jumped into a weekly newspaper, which gave me much more time. I put some money in, so that allowed me to do whatever I liked, more or less, So I could leave for United States several times a year and join the workshop with Sergei Bongart. And he had, by the way, he had some pretty famous students from the Hollywood scene. And two of them I want to mention. One was Jack Lemmon,
wow.
and the other one was Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman was a fantastic painter too, He's
wow.
now 93 years old. I don't know if he still paints. He lives in Santa Fe, but he was a great painter.
Wow.
So,
how interesting.
Yeah. So I was happy to get taught by Sergei because he was a guy from Ukraine,
Uh-huh.
And he came over into the States end of the 40s, last century, and married a lady which was Miss Tennessee in Memphis. And a few years later, she died by a car accident.
Oh.
So he was depressed about to stay longer in the Tennessee area, and then he moved to the West Coast and settled down in Santa Monica and opened up his summer residence for workshops in Idaho. So that's how it happened, And I was actually the last student who saw him alive. That was in 1985. He died. And I saw him about 5 days before in Switzerland, in the Swiss mountains, in a hospital where they tried to give him a cell therapy. He had not enough cells. I don't know which one, the red one or the white one, whatever, And so I drove down to him, saw him for maybe 20 minutes, but then I saw that he lost all his energy and I needed to go. And it was a kind of touching moment when I left him because I stood in the doorframe and looked at him the last time, and that moment we both knew we see each other the last time in this life, you know. And indeed, 5 days later, they brought him back on the airplane on a stretcher, and he died in a hospital in Santa Monica right away, you know. So he had a great, great, great influence on me. The guy is a Czechoslovakian guy, which I mentioned in Europe, you know. He painted mainly postcard-sized paintings, not big stuff. Nothing like 24 by 30 or so. Usually 8 by 10, 11 by 14, things like that. And if I would have stuck with him for the rest of my life, I still would paint postcard-sized stuff, you know. But when I came to Sergei Bongart, he taught me to paint bigger stuff, 24 by 30, 36 by 40, etc. So he taught me to paint more generous, you know, not these tiny little brushstrokes, but just more generous, looks more exciting somehow. Yeah. And this is what I'm going to try to pass on to my students. And you need to know that they usually are a little bit afraid of bigger sizes, you know, and they also like to paint very, very precise. And many folks are thinking the more precise a painting is executed, the bigger the artist must be. But that's wrong. That's not art, you know. That's just copying. That's a kind of handyman stuff, to copy something precise. But then I would ask, where is the personality of that painter? You don't see it because it's a copy of something, you know? So, but everybody is individual. Same way you are writing differently. Everybody writes different. You can give somebody the same story to write about that, and 10 people write about the same story, but it's totally different in the words and in the phrases, etc.
Yeah.
And that's the same in painting, you know. I can give my students, for example, I tell them exactly how they should look at things, how they should paint, how they should judge a subject. And you have 10 painters shoulder on shoulder painting after the same principles, the same subject, but you get absolutely 10 different paintings. And this is what they should appreciate, their individualism they have, you know, their individuum. So that's why they express themselves different. Instead, they all want to paint as precise as possible, which is so boring, you know.
Yeah. So how would you describe your style of painting?
Well, this is something, it's actually a realistic painting. You need to understand, in painting you have two directions. One direction is realism and the other direction is abstract. As long as you can recognize this is a house, this is a tree, this is the ocean, this is a rock, it's realistic painting. Now this realistic painting is divided in different sections. Mm-hmm. So you have heard about names like Impressionism, like Expressionism, mm-hmm. like Pointillism, like photographical realism, etc. Whatever that is, as long as you can recognize what the guy is painting. Yeah. If you paint the little dots like the pointillism, in the word pointillism is the word point already, you know, so points. They painted points, little points, imagine that. Millions of points on one painting drives you crazy when you have to do that, you know. So, and the Impressionists like Monet, they didn't do points, but they did comma, you know. Yeah. So that's also something. So one comma after the other, but imagine that you're sitting there for hours to do something. And but anyway, in the end, it's all realistic painting because you can recognize what the painter is doing. Yeah. And the other direction is abstract. So abstract means you do not recognize what it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So if you have an abstract painting, you can give him any kind of title you want. You can name that, for example, Grandma's 90th birthday celebration or Grandma's funeral. Same thing, you know. Yeah. Who sees a difference in abstract? It's not possible, you know. Mm. And I don't like that. I don't like abstract stuff. And today it's like lots of people like to paint abstract. Why? Because the harder way is to learn the way I paint, you know, because you need to know about temperature of the color, you need to know about value of the color, you need to know about perspective, you need to know about proportions, you need to know about composition, about design, about the brush handling, and. Yeah. So it's quite a lot of things what you need to learn to accomplish a good, realistic painting, you know. Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Guido. We'll see you in a few weeks then.
Sounds good. I see you then in a couple of weeks in Cambria.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this promotion. That's just fine, of course. You know, I appreciate it very much.
No, it's my pleasure.